The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to connect you this morning with Delegate Dave LaRock. Good to see you, sir.
Thanks, Woody. Good to see you. Good to be here.
It's a fast and frenetic session so far, only 45 days. You've got a lot of work to do. Talk to us about the economy in your district and the impact of sequestration and those kinds of things, if at all, in your constituency.
Yeah. Well, it's a great district way up at the northern part of Virginia, right up against Maryland and West Virginia. It starts in the east in Leesburg and runs kind of along Route 7 out toward Winchester. A lot of people in that district there work either for the government or for businesses that are directly connected. So sequestration has definitely been felt in that area. It does have quite a diverse population, having just campaigned not too long ago. I would walk through some of the most affluent neighborhoods probably in Virginia, and I'd walk through trailer parks and met some wonderful people in all of those neighborhoods, but very, very diverse economically.
So basically, you've got the western part of Loudoun County?
West and north of Goose Creek, yeah.
Right. Tell us a little bit more about the district. You have a lot of drive time, I take it, a lot of windshield time when you need to go meet with constituents?
Yeah, it's probably a good solid hour to go east to west or to travel the length of the district, yeah.
So are there a lot of contractors who do work with the federal government as we talk about the impact of sequestration, in addition to people who work directly for the federal government?
Probably no large contractors in the district. There may be a few that kind of work from small sort of satellite locations, but not working directly or specifically in the district, no.
And I understand you have a different committee assignment from last session, one that has probably a greater impact on your district, the Transportation Committee.
Yeah, that was one of my original assignments, and yeah, people in the district travel back and forth to work each day, very often to these jobs that are closer to Washington, and so whether you're commuting or just need to get back and forth to the grocery store, transportation is very important.
And you have some legislation specifically relating to transportation this year. Why don't you tell us about that and give us some details?
Sure. Well, as many people know, if you pay some attention to transportation, that there is an effort to kind of shift the prioritization of the selection process of projects to put an emphasis on congestion relief. And a simple way of putting that would be to say we need to get the bang for our buck for the monies that are spent. Kind of amazed me getting into this that many projects that were selected prior to this initiative in the last 3 years probably had more to do with the political clout of the people that were guiding the process. Jim LeMunyon, I think Dave Elbow put together Bill 599 passed about 3 years ago, and it basically put into law that projects that were above a certain threshold had to be analyzed. Now that doesn't specify that's the ones that prove to be the greatest need have to be the ones that get the money, but it brings that information out into the open so that there's some level of accountability that as the public and these boards are better informed about where the money is really needed. That kind of led to, I think, wording that entered into the Transportation Bill 2313 that has now have been passed. That wording carried over, and the bill and then also into House Bill 2, which passed last year, all kind of focused on making sure good projects rise to the top. The bill that I have in relates most specifically to the Northern Virginia Transportation District. part of 2313, or kind of done in parallel with that, we formed a special tax district up there, one that was actually a little controversial and was first deemed to be unconstitutional.
Right.
I think they tweaked that a little bit, and hasn't been challenged as far as I know. So there's actually a tax premium paid. I live in that portion of the district. The western portion of the 33rd district is outside that. But the NVTA has a lot of say in how those tax dollars are distributed. That's the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. There's a couple that have the same acronym there. And in this 2313, the big transportation bill, there was what we call a workaround. It was inserted, and it basically exempts transit spending, which can be a huge amount of transportation money, exempts them from this performance rating system. I've come to find out that was put in there because the rating system was not in place. Well, Jim LeMunyon, who has worked with me on this and is tracking that rating system, is very confident that that system is ready for transit. So we've asked to have that portion of the bill that exempts transit removed. And again, there seems to be really good support for that.
How is transit defined?
Transit would be commuter rail and buses.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't
No,
mean
that's
to
okay. So we're hopeful that we can win. There's some hesitation on the part of the NVTA to embrace this. I think they feel that they need a little more time to put in place a system, which actually they were required by law to put in place 3 years ago. But if they need another year to do that, we may try to work out a mutually agreeable approach to things so that they don't feel like they're put in a tough spot.
So what is the purpose of this NVTA? What is it charged to do, and what kinds of responsibilities does it have?
Yeah, well, in their responsibility statement, which you can read right on their website, it's to prioritize projects, and you need good information to do that. But they're chartered, I think is the right word, by the state of Virginia, and charged with basically focusing on the needs of Northern Virginia and guiding the transportation spending and policy in that region.
Now, is it membership comprised of members of the local community, members of the House of Delegates, and who makes those decisions about who is on that authority?
Well, the positions, I believe, are filled by the Speaker of the House, and honestly, I don't know a precise answer to that. I wouldn't be surprised if the governor has some say in the appointments, and different localities, so it's kind of dispersed regionally as well.
So what would be the end result of your legislation once passed?
Well, again, Woody, it goes along with this movement from sort of arbitrary spending to what I call a business-like approach to spending. A business wouldn't spend $100 or $1 million unless they studied it and determined that they're going to get a return on the investment. And so that's what we're really, I think, trying to bring into this transportation project. So we need to make sure that transit, which is trains again and buses, gets that close attention as well.
And of course, that close attention is something you're used to doing because you've been in business for a number of years as a contractor, and you know the importance of watching expenses in relation to into revenues. And I think the reason you got into politics, we were talking earlier, was because of some of these transportation issues.
Exactly, yeah. Transportation is we'll call it a kitchen table issue. It affects everybody. And I think I've just kind of developed a sort of a sense of, I'm somewhat frugal, and I appreciate value and economy and spending. And so it bothers me when I see that monies are being spent in a way that certainly any taxation puts a burden on people. If they're getting a good return, then everybody, I think, is satisfied. But if it goes off to things that don't accomplish anything, then that bothers me. So yeah, good place to work. And as you know, it affects the economy. When we have a good functioning transportation system, then businesses can grow and thrive. And if there's people are stuck in traffic, it's a quality of life issue. There's places in my district where certain days of the week people can sit in bottlenecked in traffic for maybe an hour or more just to get through a couple lights. That's just unacceptable. We have to do better than that.
And it also, as you indicate, it affects the ability of the state and Loudoun County, for example, to attract and keep businesses there.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about transportation in terms of the Commonwealth. Again, you sit on the Transportation Committee, and as you know, the Port of Virginia is very important in terms of economic activity in the Commonwealth. And the transportation system there is essential as well. We've got a lot of big ships now coming into the Port of Virginia as a result of the widening of the Panama Canal. How does that help the Commonwealth of Virginia?
Well, we have a lot of economic activity here, a lot of products that we need to move to world markets, and I think we need to facilitate that. Yeah, it's easy to get focused on roads and moving back and forth to work, but being able to move the products that are produced here in Virginia and to import the ones that we need those systems to be up to date and competitive and able to accommodate the ships, as you say, that move those goods. And
now, part of your district is heavily rural, or is there much agribusiness in the district?
Very much so, yeah. In fact, in Loudoun, we're kind of unique. I think we've kind of become the wine capital of Virginia. We have, I think, 50-plus functioning wineries, and that's all fairly new to the district. In the West, it's probably a little more conventional agriculture, field crops and cattle and that type of thing. Yeah.
So is that a significant economic driver for the county as well?
Oh, it sure is. Yeah, it's easy to go unnoticed, I think, because we tend to think of businesses taking place in commercial, industrial areas, but you probably know the biggest dollar amount of business is agriculture and forestry, and we definitely have that going on in the district.
And of course, Loudoun County is still one of the fastest growing counties in the nation, I believe.
That's what they tell us, yeah.
And it's fairly affluent, is it not?
Yeah, well, it's like many areas. You see both extremes. There's people there that are working at a level where many of them are just trying to make ends meet. But as you say, there's some very pockets of very affluent neighborhoods, and so yeah, I try to keep that in mind. We have to accommodate the needs of everybody in the district.
Speaking of transportation further, sort of a headline grabber is your legislation on radar detectors.
Sure.
Everybody's interested in that. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah. Well, part of the reason I approached that one, Woody, is that people have asked me to repeal that. And you've probably heard the saying that in Virginia we don't necessarily want to be the first, but we don't want to be the last either. Well, we missed the boat. If we repeal the ban on radar detectors, we will be the last state in the United States to have done that.
Oh, the last state? I didn't realize that.
All other 49 have repealed that ban, and I think for good reason. The testimony against it from law enforcement implies that there is a relationship between radar detectors and safety, but studies have refuted that. It just does not exist. So that was heard in committee and didn't move out of subcommittee. But what happens when you bring a piece of legislation like this forward is you learn more about the subject. And I think we may be on to what will lead us to victory on this next year, and I'll share that with you if you'd like.
Please.
Well, radar detector technology we think of typically as a little device, and that's what you'd see, but they're developing apps now for cell phones. We just learned this since the hearing, so it would have been nice to have presented it. As cell phone apps turn personal smartphones into radar detectors, and that's already happening right now, the law, as it's written, would then require that device be unplugged and kept in a compartment separate from the driver.
Very interesting.
So the way I read that is pretty obviously is that if this phone is now a radar detector, you won't be able to drive in Virginia with you in the compartment of the car. I don't think people will accept a radar ban that doesn't allow you to have your phone with you in the car. So
absolutely not.
We'll develop that approach and see what happens next year.
I guess another technology transportation issue that has developed this session is the ability of new technologies in competition with our taxi cab industry to enter the market in the Commonwealth of Virginia, Uber, Lyft.
Yeah.
Have you been involved in those discussions and debate?
Well, whether I like it or not, I've been very involved, yeah, and I'm certainly glad to have people from both sides drawing my focus to what really are the most important aspects of that. It's about developing a new regulatory regime for an innovative new industry, and I'm astounded at I believe the proper phrase would be the capitalization of that market is billions and billions of dollars. I've heard $60 billion, which answers my question as to why there's so much activity going on. They're serious about getting that up and running, and apparently see it as a great business opportunity.
So how does that service work? I think there's an app that you can download to your smartphone, which gives you the ability to basically beckon them to come pick you up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're talking to a guy that's just still learning to use a smartphone, so if I can explain it to you, it's got to be pretty simple. As I understand it, this originally began as someone who wanted to develop a ride-share technology so that one person in one location needed a ride somewhere and someone else was going to a place nearby, they could connect with each other. And essentially that is what this app does now, only it has now been applied commercially so that Uber, for example, would maintain the app and connect the rider who wants a ride with a driver who, and this is kind of gets to the separation, that a driver who is not an employee of Uber but has qualified to work with them as to transport that person. So it connects the rider who needs a ride with the driver who's ready to go, and hopefully works to get them where they need to go. The controversy, again, is that taxi cab drivers are locked into one set of regulations that has a state component, but is also varies considerably because regionally localities may have a set of rules and regulations that monitor taxi cabs. So their side would say that they need to be treated in a way that doesn't put them at a very distinct disadvantage because they're more heavily regulated than the Uber drivers.
Now, do the taxi cab companies have to get a certificate to operate from the State Department of Transportation or anything like that?
I don't want to answer that because I believe the answer is yes. They're licensed. They do have to do background checks, and there are insurances that they have to keep. And exactly what the state's role in that is now, I don't want to say, but I know that, again, places like in toward Washington and even out in Loudoun, there's some degree of regulation by the local government as well.
Right, and of course we want to encourage competition because it does have the tendency to improve service and products, no question about it. But as you indicate, we want to make sure that there's enough insurance coverage to cover someone who's riding in a private vehicle, for example.
Yeah.
You want to make sure there are background checks to ensure that the drivers aren't convicted felons, that you can feel safe. And there are other requirements that probably will have to apply equally to Uber as they do to the existing taxi cab companies.
Yeah, all those are necessary, I think, to make sure the public's adequately protected.
But as you indicate, it's a very large industry and it has the potential to create jobs.
I think you're right, yeah.
Great, so that's a really good subject area. Talk to us about what's going on in terms of education. I understand that the current budget pretends to hold K through 12 harmless and to some extent the institutions of higher learning. How are school districts doing in your neck of the woods, so to speak, and what reactions, if any, have you had from superintendents and school teachers?
Yeah, well, again, we have Loudoun, which is a more affluent county, Frederick, which is probably a little bit more like average America, and Clarke County is kind of nestled in between, and that is just a kind of very lightly developed rural community, and they like to keep it that way. So there's different levels of challenges in each of the district, but funding is certainly one that always is very high on the list. The overall challenge, I think, is to meet the needs that are imposed on these school districts by state and federal mandates, and just the basic need to educate the number of children that are coming in and out of the system. As you may know, I have a piece of legislation that hopes to ease some of the burden that's being put on these schools. And
Talk to us a little bit more about that legislation and what it would do.
sure. Well, there's a program that's been brought into practice in Arizona and then more recently in Florida. And what it does is target what I've been told by school board members is the biggest problem that these schools face. Now that got my attention when I heard that. Special needs populations are really dramatically increasing. State Board of Education published a paper showing a 23% increase of autistic and other disabilities in the last 5 years. They're the most expensive. They pose the greatest demands academically and in the cost to accommodate the needs of those children. So that, with just general budget constraints and limitations, is a really serious problem. So we can't just put it off and hope it goes away. We're going to have to come up with some solutions. This education savings account is the program that I've put forward, has been tried in Arizona. And what it does is it uses some of the state's SOQ funding. That's just basically general education spending that goes from the state to the schools, proposes to take 90% of that and put it in an account which is controlled by parents. I've met many parents that are just very much at their ends trying to deal with accessing what they feel their children need. And I'll back up and say many parents are probably satisfied, but these children are even more unique and their needs are more diverse than the average non-special needs student. So by allowing parents to kind of enter this as a driver of an education program, we give them a little bit of state funding. I say a little bit, $4,000 maybe would be the average amount, but relative to what these kids may need. These are kids whose education plan maybe takes as high as I was told by someone in my district, as high as $100,000 per year for children with multiple disabilities. So we hope to kind of throw a lifeline to the schools, the parents, and the teachers by, again, just allowing this flexibility through this education savings account for parents to kind of go into the marketplace, put together a combination of learning methods, would be tutors, online learning, and a variety that really works best for that child. So it's not going to fix the whole problem, but I think it'll put something in motion when we are able to get this in place that will, I think, show us areas where, again, we can achieve cost-effective results. And this can all be done leaving the local portion of the per-student spending in place, 100%. We don't want to take money away from the schools. And so we see it as a win-win. And
great. So this would allow parents greater options to fashion solutions along with the schools that they think are appropriate for their children.
Yeah. Well, it actually would allow them to move out of the public schools.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I skipped over a whole lot of the details, but yeah, that's an important aspect. They would enter into a contract whereby they would agree to remove their child from a public school and take the responsibility for that child's education.
Okay, so this would have a great and significant positive impact on those parents who want to homeschool their students, their children then.
That's right. That would be one of the groups that would be enabled by this to enter that alternative form of education.
But it would also allow parents, for example, to take advantage of, to the extent that it's available, a charter school, for example.
Now, because charter schools essentially are funded by the state,
Right.
the idea really here is to move children, if the parents opt to, into a system that is funded. Because this education savings account would be funded by the state, charter schools and public schools would not be open.
Okay.
Pretty much every education alternative outside that's legitimate would be an allowable expenditure.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about another issue that's been around for the last few years, and that's the standards of learning. And they were tweaked to some extent last session. I know there's debate going on about what other changes may be necessary.
Yeah. Well, Woody, we developed kind of specialties, and although I get the concept there, I've talked to teachers who are very, very frustrated. They've kind of been turned into pencil-pushing bureaucrats. I hope offend anybody. Excuse me, offend anybody saying that, but we want teachers that are doing what they entered the profession to do, and that is interacting with kids in a way that really makes the kids, helps them to get an education. And the more we can allow that to take place without overburdening them with these tests, I think is good. Made some progress last year. I know my colleague from Loudon, Tag Greason, is kind of running point on that issue. He's doing a great job, and I think we'll see that shuffled around a little bit this year in a way that is beneficial to all the players there.
And a couple of other issues that apparently have hit the pause button, so to speak, relate to the ability of the state to take over a failing school district and the ability of parents to get some kind of a grade about their local school district from A to F. Where do those stand now?
Yeah, well, we're all about accountability, and certainly that's the focus of that program, and in that respect it is good. But one might say that's one of those the unintended consequences that has kind of come up as a result of that, is brought to my attention by people in my community, is that there's some negative impacts when a school has that label put on them. We're not, school districts do not have a balanced group of children who are gifted similarly demographically. There's quite big swings there. So for one school who may have children, or for example, who are disproportionately more of the English language learners, that's a huge burden on a school, and so may affect how they're ranked, and they may be doing as good or better a job as a school who isn't challenged in that way. So it's hard to make a system balanced, even though that's the direction. So we don't want to label schools as failing, because that I think maybe one could say even makes it harder for them to improve. So we got to work with those unintended consequences. Certainly focus on accountability, but we don't want to put the schools that are struggling at a disadvantage either.
Well, thank you for being here. I know we didn't get a chance to discuss all of your legislation, but I'm sure that the residents of your district should be very proud of what you're doing here, and hopefully we can have you back again in the near future.
I look forward to that, Woody. Thanks so much for having me today.
Thank you, Delegate Dave LaRock. Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.